My name is Nancy Gonzalez. I'm a senior wild animal keeper at the Bronx Zoo. So I have a list of questions here. I'm just going to start answering them, and hopefully gives you a little bit what you need. In terms of disadvantages of flightlessness in penguins, one of the things that is a big disadvantage is the inability to kind of evade predators. If you compare the penguin's abilities to get away from predators to things like puffins, which would be their counterpart in the northern hemisphere, puffins will actually be able to fly away. If they're being chased by a sea lion or chased by a shark, they can just pop out of the water and leave. Penguins don't have that ability. They actually have to outswim their predators. They have to be able to get to their nesting sites by walking to them, as opposed to being able to nest up on cliffs that are inaccessible. And so, that is limiting for a flightless bird. That is something that they kind of have to adapt to and be able to make that work to their advantage. If you don't have the ability to fly away from something, you also don't have the ability to fly to larger distances to look for food. So you have to be able to swim to everything or walk to everything in order to get to the resources that you need in order to feed your chicks, in order to feed yourself. So those are kind of important points that make it a disadvantage to be able to fly. Okay. Their wings have evolved into paddles, essentially, and that is, we call them flippers, and that is something that helps propel them through the water, much the way a bird would fly through the air, but it's a different medium, so they need something that's a little denser. And they don't have primaries or secondaries. All of their feathers are tiny compacted feathers that interlock, and that helps them to keep waterproof. They also have specific oils that they use for their feathers, and penguin oils, especially for the birds that live further south in colder climates, closer to Antarctica or in Antarctica, their oils, which all birds produce to some extent, but their oils in particular have elements that keep the water from freezing on their feathers. So they actually can adapt to living in these extreme environments because they can get out of the water droplets don't freeze on them, and they just roll right off the feathers before they can even dry or freeze. They also have these very torpedo-shaped bodies, and so they can just go through the water and they cut through it, and it's very easy for them to kind of get the water to kind of rotate around them and make like a foil behind them and move through the water very easily without using a lot of energy. So, okay. So the ocean is actually a very rich reservoir of protein. All the food items that you can find, fish are really high in protein content. So if you were looking for a good source of nutrition, that's obviously a good place to go. And if a bird can find that and maximize the amount of food that they can get, then that's an actual source of protein that a lot of animals can't necessarily access. So if you are looking for a way to get a kind of food that no one else can get, and you become a specialist at doing that, and being able to swim in the ocean is a big advantage to getting yourself a really high source of protein that no one else has access to, then that would be a good pressure for an animal to kind of learn to swim, to be a committed swimmer. And if it's enough for them to be able to get into the ocean and get enough food for themselves, for their chicks, and it's actually worth the advantage of having this really rich energy source, then I could see that being a big pressure towards being a swimming-only bird. So swimming ability enables a bird to swim to further areas. So a faster swimming bird might be able to catch more fish, might be able to get further away from the areas and find hunting areas or fishing areas that are more convenient. And so a bird that can hunt better or fish better, in this case, will actually be in better body condition overall. So a bird that is in really good prime condition is going to attract more mates, because this is a bird that has proven that it can feed itself. It will be a good provider for the females that are sitting on the nest. It will be a good provider, likewise for the females. If they can swim better, their egg quality will be better. Their likelihood of having fertile eggs will be higher, and they will be able to then hunt, bring back good food for their chicks, and have a better likelihood of having their chicks raised to adulthood. And so those things in body condition, that's what the mates look for. They look for a bird that's healthy. They look for a bird that looks like they can provide and is not going to leave them stuck on a nest of chicks that are going to starve, because that is their alternative. If the mate does not come back in time, they have no choice but to leave the nest, and that means that the chicks are not going to make it. It's extremely rare for us to see penguins that have mutations, because penguins that have mutations usually do not survive to adulthood. If a penguin in captivity, sometimes we have seen things where their molt is unusual, which is when they lose their feathers and grow new ones. Some penguins in captivity have been found to have a condition where they don't grow in their feathers normally, or they don't grow in feathers at all, so they're kind of a naked penguin. In captivity or in a rehab situation, you can actually work around that, and we've had some penguins, not necessarily here, but in other places, where they've made little coats for them, they've made little sweaters for them, they've made little rubber suits for them so they could swim in the water. And after a year or so, they go into another molt, and the feathers will come back normally. In the wild, that's not an option. In the wild, if you don't have feathers, you die. So we never see that in the wild, because it's very unusual. The mutations might be out there, but they're pretty rare and they're hard to find. So male penguins tend to be a little bit heavier. Most species, the males tend to be a little bit heavier than females. That means in terms of body size, they can swim a little further out. They can survive a little bit longer without eating. So that means that they have a little bit more of an opportunity to hunt for food, and they tend to go a little bit further out in the ocean to look for food than the females can. The other species, it depends on the species, but Magellanica penguins can travel 170 kilometers in one day. That's a long distance, but something like king penguins will probably extend that range, and emperor penguins can dive even further than any Magellanic can. So it depends on the habitat that they're living in, but all these adaptations kind of allow them to be in the environment that they are. So emperor penguins can dive further because they're bigger, they can tolerate the cold a little bit better. But other penguins in other areas may not be able to swim as far, but they might be in a location that is really closer to maybe the big supply of fish that they need, so they don't need to go as far, and they're adapted to kind of dealing with the heat instead.